Welcome to the Canny Conversations podcast, Conversations with a Cause, with social entrepreneur Safaraz. In these podcasts, he shares his thoughts with journalist Adrian Kibler. So, let's join the conversation.
Welcome to Canny Conversations with Safaraz. My name's Adrian Kibler. This podcast aims to bring you a canny conversation with a cause. Conversations that we hope will captivate your curiosity cannily. And what I want to talk about, or what we're going to have a chat about today, is getting the best out of people. And I want to talk a bit about numbers as well. So I want, first of all, Saf, to tell me how you go about motivating people and how you go about agreeing with them, key performance indicators, targets, that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a topic that's quite close to my heart. The first thing that I will say is motivation often is short term, and in terms of long term planning and long term sustainability, it's about dedication and having drivers that individual will look to follow and pursue. So motivation isn't the same as dedication. Motivation tends to be short term. What we tend to focus on is inspiring and getting the best out of people, and being in a position where getting them more aware of the opportunities, understanding the vision of the organization, and then really setting goals, objectives, and being able to work towards those goals, and being able to set goals and attain goals.
I just want to explore how you define goals, because I guess they're at two levels, aren't they? There's the individual goal, just for the sake of argument, a salesperson, to generate X amount of sales in a set period of time. But I also want to talk about something which in one of your books you refer to as, I think it's the great big hairy goal or objective, which is sort of much bigger. Just talk me through what a great hairy objective.
Yeah, so that's obviously a concept which is quite familiar with regard to setting higher level goals and setting maybe unattainable goals but failing well. So having a big target, having a sort of aspirational target, rather than maybe, we talk about SMART targets, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. But it's about getting rid of the achievable and the realistic, and having something which is specific, measurable, and time bound. But maybe you may perceive that it's not achievable or it's not realistic, but something that's hairy and audacious, big, bigger, aspirational, and then working towards that and stretching yourself, having stretching and challenging targets. I think that's where the thinking is. From my perspective, a lot of that will revolve around having performance development plans, having objectives that the business is working towards, and really planning the year out, but into chunks. So we work on 90-day goals, and then what we do is we have pledges as well. So pledges are sort of promises that, at the very least, we're going to achieve this, and this is how we're going to be doing it. And we reiterate that in terms of our team meetings, and we follow that up. So we get the individual to pledge that they will achieve, and then they work towards that. And that then becomes peer sort of support, some element of peer coaching, some positive peer pressure as well, and working towards that individual achieving their goals.
I mean, as far as the big goals are concerned, I suppose the biggest one I can instantly think of, this one from the past, was when John Kennedy said, in the end of this decade, we're going to put a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth, which at the time, a lot of people thought was pie in the sky. More recently, I suppose, if you'd have said to most experts 12 months ago that within less than a year there'd be a viable, effective and safe vaccine developed for COVID, they'd have said, well, come on, you're not being sensible. Is that the real purpose of these big goals, that they provide a vision and something to work for? And isn't the lesson from the two examples I gave that you can be surprised what you might achieve if you really aim for it. And of course, especially if money is no objective. What do you think about that?
I think whatever the goal is or whatever you're looking to try and achieve, as a group of people, a collective, whatever that group is, whether it's the organisation, we've got to get behind it and fully believe in it. And I think then you've got that element of dedication, the obsession. And unless it's driving you in terms of you're thinking about it day and night, then it's left aside. So a lot of people, particularly New Year resolutions, they're sort of wishful thinking, but they're not necessarily drivers that the person's going to be living and breathing. And this is where the motivation dries out, and you're in a position where you're not living, breathing, dreaming that goal and working towards it. And I think this is where it's got to be something where part of your DNA, part of your blood, you're living and breathing and thinking about it all the time. And then what you'll find is that you can make a difference, and you can go about that change.
I mean, the message I'm getting is you'd prefer, tell me if I'm wrong, but you'd prefer somebody to set an ambitious goal and fail well, rather than something that's not particularly challenging and always achieve it. Is that fair?
Generally, I say to people, we would be very pleased if they set themselves a goal and achieve the goal. Most people say something, but they don't do it. So for me, if they say what they're going to do and then do it, that's a big plus. And just getting that on its own is a big win. So if they commit to something and then they achieve it, you'll be head and shoulders above 9/10 of people or 90% of people just by saying something and doing it. We need to recognize that there's a lot of people who say certain things, aspire to something, and then don't actually do it. Whether that's targets in terms of timescales, whether that's producing some results, it just doesn't get done. And then by setting something which is slightly higher to drive you even further, I think it depends on your drivers, it depends on how you're thinking. It's like, for me, it's like saying, setting my clock 5 minutes earlier, but then realizing the fact that I've set it and then I discount that and it doesn't really make a difference. It's really whether you set something to actually really hit it, or set something on the basis that it looks good. And then if we don't hit it, it's not too bad. So it depends on how your viewpoint is and your perception is, and we all slightly different in terms of how our thinking is, but there will be people who will set a goal and try and hit it with both.
I mean, in terms of setting goals and for individuals and for businesses, I know you're a great believer in, well, I believe you're a great believer in the importance of data. In one section of one of the books, you talk about the value of data, but also the importance of knowing which numbers to look at, and also making sure that you interpret the data correctly. What exactly do you mean by that?
I think generally a culture of knowing your numbers is what we live by as an organisation. Data, I think, is one of the most important currencies there is for any business. And if you're looking to improve something, you've got to start measuring something. You've got to have a barometer or something to look at to be focused on. There is a saying that we get what we focus on, and we've got to focus on something that is tangible, that you can look at, you can measure, and then hopefully you can improve. From a data currency perspective, we use a department in our business called the Management Information Systems, MIS, which give us what we call in our business the single version of the truth. What we find is that sometimes the contract managers and others have a perspective, have a viewpoint, but what we want to do is we want the numbers, the data to do the talking, and that's the single version of the truth, and that's how we tend to measure things. So, in terms of our contracts and our performance, we get that information from our data team, our MIS team, and whatever the activities are, whatever the results are, that comes from that source. It's measurable, it's agreed upon, and then that's what we work from, as opposed to getting the individual managers to report on their progress. We work from that, and then we get the narrative from the managers. We want everybody in our organization to be very comfortable with data, be able to interpret data. It's one of our key skills and traits that we look for. And what we believe is that if you're a manager of people, manager of resources, then you've got to be attuned to being able to read, interpret, and work with data.
You take us on to a very interesting point when you talk about the interpretation of data. And one of the dangers, I think, is that it's very easy to have a set of data and to come to a conclusion as to what that data means and without perhaps considering all the factors. I mean, the example that springs to mind, a few years ago there was some data that showed that if you were admitted to hospital on a Sunday, you were significantly more likely to die than if you were admitted to hospital during the week. And there were some people that jumped to the conclusion that that meant that there was an inferior service in hospitals on a Sunday, that it was all junior doctors. And then they dug a little bit deeper and somebody said, well, hang on, people are not normally admitted to hospital on a Sunday, and therefore anybody who's taken to hospital on a Sunday is de facto going to be an emergency because they've had an accident or they're seriously ill. But it's just an example of how it's so easy to have a set of data, a set of numbers, and interpret them in the wrong way. How do you go about this process of understanding how to interpret the data correctly?
I think we need to appreciate and realise that a lot of our decisions or conclusions are very much emotional. We work on emotion more than what traditionally we would call logic. And even when we've got the facts right in front of us, we would interpret that, from our own bias, from our own perspective, from our own viewpoint and our own logic. That's something that we've got to be aware of. We've got to be aware of confirmation bias. We've got to be aware of the fact that we would interpret it differently. One person would interpret it differently to completely somebody else. And I think we've got to realise that we want to be looking at evidence-based decisions, evidence-based, and be able to show why we're making those decisions. And sometimes you've got to go underneath the data. And this is why sometimes, you've heard the saying before, damn lies on statistics, and you have a viewpoint and then you look at the data to confirm the viewpoint that you've made. And this is why sometimes stats and data has had a bad reputation, because people will spin the data and the numbers to suit their own narrative and their own thinking. And we've got to be more conscious and aware of the fact that happens. That happens in, obviously, world politics. It happens nationally. It happens in organisations as well. And that's why we have teams of people who just look at data, give us the data, and we will look at it from a black and white perspective, as opposed to maybe the manager who will interpret it in a slightly different way. So our theme within our organisation is to measure it as what it is, as opposed to trying to put a bit of a context towards it and maybe a bias towards it. I think that's the thinking anyway, in terms of from my perspective.
How are you in terms of creating sort of competition within teams? I mean, there are some organisations, and I can think of one in particular, that there's a group of people that work together as a team, but their successes are widely broadcast and everybody sees how everybody else is doing. So it creates within that team a hugely competitive environment. I mean, do you think that sort of thing is helpful when you set people against each other? Or do you think it can be quite damaging and corrosive?
I think we can take the negative out of any situation. It depends on a person's view. And what we talk about is, above the line thinking, which is about ownership, accountability, responsibility, be open to change, be open to the information, not necessarily talk about blaming others or having excuses, but own up to certain things. Our view generally is that performance should be encouraged and discussed at a company level. So managers should know how others are performing, and they should have confidence in terms of how they've been measured. And we should look at improving each other And I often use the fact that we're a team because we make each other better. And part of that is creating competition, healthy competition. Part of that is actually setting standards and keep pushing and driving small improvements regularly, and marginal sort of improvements, marginal difference, that 1 degree difference continuously, constantly, and being open to learning. So one of the examples I can give you is after every managers meeting, we have a ranking, and we get the other managers to rank each other, to say so for example, we have a managers meeting where there's 8 managers, and in that we'll get them to rank each other in terms of communication, in terms of impact, and in terms of inspiration. So 3 areas: communication, inspiration, and impact. And each one is ranked out of, say, 8, 1 being the best and 8 being the lowest, and then comments. So it's tough sometimes to read that, and sometimes tough for somebody to take that. But then each person is then pushing each other to try and get the best out of each other as well. But what happens is that they're more aware of what people are saying, more aware of improvements, and then constantly looking to improve their key messages, inspire others, become role models, and make a difference continuously. So that's something that we do as an organization. It's not for everybody, but our organization, part of our culture is that the fact that we discuss performance continuously. We're transparent in our data, transparent in terms of our P&L, our profit and loss. We're transparent in terms of our numbers, our contracts. So I have contract performance indicators. So red, amber, green, and gold. Each contract is rated in terms of how it's performing. Is it on target? Is it where it should be? What are the issues within that contract? So each of the managers can actually read each other's contract, and that's shared on a monthly basis. And that information comes from originally data, but then I put my interpretation, my view on it, and I share that with the team as well. So constantly, in different ways and different guises, there is information that's been shared and performance being discussed.
How do you deal with the dilemma of a situation where the team goal and the individual goal might, to some degree, conflict with each other? And I'm going to give you a very simple example of this. A football team, one of the strikers, has been set a target to score 25 goals in a season. And he's playing in a game during the season and he needs to reach that target. And he's got a position where he can have a shot at goal and there's a chance he might score. But there's a teammate who is much better placed. If he passes the ball to that teammate, there's a pretty decent chance that teammate will score. The fact that the person has got the target to score 25 goals a season could actually be counterproductive from the team's point of view, because maybe he'd be more likely to have a go himself. The team would be more likely to score, but he would not be so likely to reach his target. So there can be conflicts, can't there, between the overall company or team objective and the individual goal.
The first thing is, it's amazing how a team can perform and what a business can achieve if nobody's really bothered in terms of who gets the credit. So as long as you're not really that fussed in terms of who gets the credit, and you are a team, and as I said, a team where you're helping each other and you make each other better rather than one-upmanship, I think there's a lot there to be said. If everybody is on the same page in terms of doing it for the right reasons, then I think there's no issue. Where you have got where you have personality clashes, or where people are looking for attention or looking for justification in terms of their role, then there's issues, and that isn't a sign of a high performing team. That's a sign of individualism, and so, we sometimes need to work in silos, but a lot of the time we need to get individuals to work together to help each other and to achieve the overall objective for the business. I think that's the key for me in terms of understanding where the business is going, what your own contribution to the business is, and how collectively we're going to win.
I mean, I think that's very interesting what you're saying. One of the dangers, do you think, with targets is it can encourage people to always go for the low-hanging fruit. For example, if you've got a sales team and the salesperson is set a target of, I don't know, let's say making 15 sales in a month. If they've got a choice between going for what's potentially a big money sale and a lot of little penny numbers money sale, if the target that's been set them is the numeric target in terms of number of sales, the danger surely is that they'll try and get the 15 easy ones, but not go for the hard but potentially much more rewarding one. What do you feel about that?
A lot of that is about sustainability. So short-term thinking. A lot of organizations work on sort of quarterly sales or monthly sales, and when you've got a longer-term perspective, longer-term goals, and depends on how you set your key performance indicators, what are the key sort of tools that you're measuring as a business, and for us, it's actually defining what's important. And as you said, you could be in a position where you've got monthly targets, monthly sales, and then you could be in a position where those are achieved, but they're not chipping away over the longer term goals. And for us, it's about having the longer term goal, and then having smaller milestones to work towards that. That's the key for us in terms of overall understanding where the business needs to be, and then bringing that back. So you start with the end in mind, and then you break that into chunks, as opposed to having small chunks that may be meaningless in their own right.
When you're preparing a target for staff, do you believe that that's best done collectively with the people themselves being involved in determining the target, so that they have ownership of it, or do you think that you really sort of the targets come from the top and it's for the person who's got to deliver them to do the best they can?
A combination of both to a certain level. In some cases, the targets are defined by the contract itself. Where the contract needs to be, what we've signed up to, what we as an organisation have agreed to commit ourselves. We're presently working with the West Midlands Combined Authority, where we've got a target to recruit, say, 180 level 3 digital qualification entrants. That's a target that we've agreed to as a contract. We've got our own performance indicators. We've got our own milestones that we've agreed to. So that's a company commitment. We've got to put that into a framework for the contract manager to perform, and then work with them in terms of a business plan to ensure the fact that as a company we hit that. If we just went to the manager in terms of, or the individuals to ask them what they could achieve, that figure may not tally completely with what we as a business need to be achieving. So overall is, where do we want to get to? What is the objective? What are we working towards? And then whatever resource, whatever effort we need to do to actually hit that, that's the key. And sometimes we're in a position where we're having to pick work up where the opportunity is there, but we may have maybe focus on other things. And for us, it's also being able to be flexible in our approach to grasp those opportunities and increase the numbers if we need to, or change accordingly if we need to. So being flexible in our approach as well. Otherwise, it's you've got a path that you're following, and that's all that matters. And sometimes it doesn't work, as easily as that.
I remember a car salesman once saying to his boss, going into the office and saying, "We've had a great month. This month our turnover is X," and the wizened old boss turning around and saying, "Look, lad, it ain't turnover that matters; it's leftover." So, in terms of the way that you've obviously got a financial background, you've heard the saying as well as I have. Turnover is sanity, profit is vanity, and cash is king. In terms of understanding the numbers that tell whether a company is doing well or badly, would that always be the profit number?
Yeah, just to add to that, the saying that I tend to sort of often quote is turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash flow is king. But the impact that you do, that's the main thing. So it's about the impact, it's about the results, it's about what you achieve. Then after that, hopefully the money will follow. We talk about being a business that makes a difference. If we're making a difference, if we're making an impact, then hopefully everything else will fall into place. But if you're chasing the money, if you're chasing things for the wrong reason, then it becomes a bit difficult. And I think when you're looking at where can you make the biggest difference, where you can make the biggest impact, play to your strengths as an organization, build up a reputation where you dominate a sector, dominate a niche, where you get known for that particular niche, then hopefully things come into place, come into shape, and work just becomes a lot easier. You're not swimming against the tide, and it just flows a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, I once worked for a business that had a annual turnover of £50 million, which sounded great until you realise actually they were losing almost double that a year. So that's a very good point. Talking about figures, I mean, when you're preparing a budget for the coming year, do you sort of say, well, 10% of our predicted turnover should go on marketing and 15% on investment in new plant? I mean, is it as simple as that or not?
I think your starting point always is about where you are in terms of the current year. That's the starting point. What we tend to do is have have aspirational targets in terms of what we were looking to achieve. Your starting point is really understanding your present numbers. That's your baseline. How much have you spent? Where if there are efficiency savings, every business looks for efficiency savings, but much more importantly, I think we all look for getting more for less, getting better performance, improving on your performance, getting better results, and we do whatever is necessary. We look at, for example, if we're going to spend X amount of money on marketing, then what is the return on investment? For us, a pound in marketing or a pound that we're spending, we should be able to quantify that, and we should be able to sort of understand the importance of it as well, and be able to justify what we're spending wherever possible. And I think for us, one of our key areas that we're spending more is in IT, digital, looking for efficiency savings there, looking to reduce friction, and focusing on our customer experience. So for us, one of our bigger areas is the use of technology, use of the digital platforms that we have got. So we're spending more on the customer experience and ensuring the fact that we understand our customers a bit more, the data behind that. And that may not have been part of our spend maybe 3 years ago.
I want to finish this broadcast by talking about something which is social entrepreneurship, which I know that you're a great champion of. Well, first of all, just briefly explain to me what you mean by social entrepreneurship. And then how do you put a value on the social benefit that you bring? I mean, can you put a monetary value on it?
I think for me anyway, it's social entrepreneurship is all about social impact. And it's about the difference, the impact that you're making in a social type business. What that basically means is people-related businesses where you're changing, improving people's lives. So the businesses that I'm involved with in our health and social care, so domiciliary care organisation, education and training organisation. We've done impact analysis where we've worked out that we've got X amount of people into jobs. How much money has that saved the government, and how much wealth has that created the economy as well? So, these are things that are measurable. We can also talk about, for example, in the health and social care, we've helped somebody in terms of a hospital discharge. How much money has that saved the NHS? If somebody can leave hospital a few days earlier because we can provide a package at home, then there's obviously benefit there to UK PLC, to the National Health Service. These are measurable things. The government, the civil service does measure all of these things in terms of the impact that it has, and look to drive more performance and impact from these types of businesses. Again, another example is the foster care business we're in. Again, there's a saving if we can actually get a a foster parent, a foster carer to look after a child, as opposed to maybe the individual being looked after in a children's home. So these are quite easy, quantifiable savings that can be demonstrated.
Yeah, but I don't think a lot of people understand that, do they? I mean, it's very easy to think in terms of a business. You know, we made X millions of pounds last year because we sold X jet engines or whatever. But do you think there is sufficient understanding of the value of social entrepreneurship to the individuals and to the country?
I think people understand if it's a business with a good purpose. You know, if they'll see, okay, that's a positive business. Obviously with the health and social care sector, clap for carers and so forth. People have realised that we rely on these individuals to keep us alive, keep us ticking, and they are the backbone. They are the foundations of the organisation. The same way with education, teaching, and so forth. These are things that we do rely on. These are things that we do value. What I would also say is that the government, local authorities, national government realised that there's many things that the private sector, independent companies can do better than the public sector. So 25 years ago, the local authorities started outsourcing social care. And what they realised at the time, back in when I was working for Sandwell Council, that it was costing them for 1 hour of care around, at that time, £25 to £26, where they could outsource it, and the total cost, including managing that, would be less than half. Around 42% or thereabouts it was at the time. So that's a very clear efficiency saving, just by being able to work with a provider, but ensuring the same quality, the thresholds are there. And it's about getting the right commissioning, getting the right management of that, and playing to people's strengths. And you can drive performance, just being open-minded in terms of working with different types of organisations, creating a competitive environment. Competition, at the end of the day, drives performance, gets the results, and it's a win-win for all.
Yes, absolutely. We're out of time again, which is unfortunate, but now we are at the point at which we curtail our Canny conversations with a cause. Thank you for listening, and catch up at your convenience.
Thanks for listening to this Canny conversation with a cause. These conversations are based upon the Canny Bites books by Safaraz Ali, available on Amazon. To find out more, go online and visit Saf's website, pathwaygroup.co.uk, or join him on social media. He can be contacted at safaraz@pathwaygroup.co.uk.